Think of some of the cases that you've heard out here where the frauds have been, people have been working there 30 years and suddenly they discover 130 million that the person has taken fraudulently. What I don't understand about those cases is that we have a basic idea of what people earn. Jamaica is a small society. How is it we don't question a bank teller who's driving an X5? My name is Karen Bailey and I'm a forensic accountant. A lot of people don't know what that means, but basically I'm a trained chartered accountant. I have a law degree and I'm also an expert witness. Recently I concretized this skill by qualifying as a certified fraud examiner, which is a US professional exam. I am originally from Manchester and I attended Knox and Manchester High School. I live in the UK, I practice in the UK, and I work with the 5th largest advisory firm in the world. My work takes me across various jurisdictions. I've done work in the USA, the Bahamas, Switzerland, UK of course, and sometimes in Canada. And I've done extension work out of Africa as well. So the work touches whichever jurisdiction the client comes from. So that's a synopsis of what I do. I did not know about forensic accounting as a name, but I knew I wanted to do law and accounting. And then in like the late 1990s, forensic accounting became a big profession, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. So I went back to London School of Economics and did my master's degree in criminology, and then started to practice as a forensic accountant 16 years ago.
What made you want to do that?
I grew up in a Christian home, and one of the things my mother always instilled in us is about theft and about do unto others as you have them do unto you. So I am very, very, when it comes to theft, it's one of my peeves. I won't even say a pet peeve, it's a major peeve. So when people are dishonest, it means they're being hypocritical and they're also hurting other people. So if I can offer a service where I help people, not just big corporations, but the small man, then I thought I am contributing positively to society as well.
All right, you said you work in various jurisdictions. What about the laws? Do the laws differ across jurisdictions?
They do differ. They have similar names. For example, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the UK is similar to the UK Bribery Act. And sometimes what they do is that they have the differences are cultural nuances. So for example, in the EU, when the EU passes a directive for those in the community, which Great Britain is no longer part of that, they develop their own laws within their domestic jurisdiction to take care of their own cultural nuances and words. And for example, International Standards and Auditing speaks about the auditor's responsibility for fraud, which is to identify fraud and to determine if there is a material fraud within their financial statements. In the UK version not just says fraud, it also says suspected fraud. So it widens the gap and widens the net. So that's how cultural nuances come into the laws locally.
A lot of people believe that fraud is underreported in places like Jamaica. I too believe that. Tell me, what is fraud?
So fraud is it's the misrepresentation of facts with the intention to cause harm. So it's the intention. So I come to you, let's give a simple example, and say to you, if you give me $10, I can pay down on this piece of land for you. And the intention is for me to take that $10. It's not that I am charging you a little more or a little, what they call it in Jamaica, like a little tip. The intention is to get the $10 from you because I know the land does not exist. So that's fraud. If I say to you the land is $15 and I am only giving 10 to the person who I'm purchasing the land for, then a proportion of that is fraudulent, not the entire 15. But even though the intent was there to steal $5 at the start, so the 15 minus the 10, which is a genuine thing. So that kind of maybe borders on corruption, more financial crime than fraud.
I don't know if you are aware of the situation where persons say that they purchased land from a man somewhere in and around the Bernard Lodge Sugar Estate area, and sections of the property were bulldozed, and including some houses that were being built. Several persons have shown paperwork where they paid money and they received a receipt to say that yes, I paid the money and this is the receipt from whichever agency or whomever is representing the agency that's selling the land. Now the government says that some of those persons, they don't have any permission to live there. Is that fraud? Is that corruption? Or is it both?
I think it's both. I think it's a combination. So whoever sold them a land was fraudulently misrepresented to them that they could sell the land and that they're the custodian of the land. I don't know the whole story, but from the little that I've read, they've entered into a contract of sale, they have paid for it, and now they have nothing. That is wholesale fraud. On the other side of it, whoever it was that was representing the agency, I don't know if it's a genuine person or just a con man or a fraudster, as we call it, that is corruption. Because if these people were given a paperwork and were paying taxes, for example, why is it their proprietary right isn't recognized? That is corruption. That is wholesale corruption. But in terms of the exchange of funds with someone who's selling, that is fraud.
All right. So
but they are all financial crimes.
They're all financial crimes, right? Right. So when we think fraud, we should not only think of what happens in a bank, for example, when somebody's account goes from 10 million to 0 million, or some building society, some other financial institution where people's money just go missing and nobody knows exactly what to do. Do you think we have enough protection for persons who are defrauded by financial institutions?
The ones I've seen so far are insider jobs. And insider jobs is where most frauds lie, because you need certain information to perpetuate these frauds. So in terms of protection, it's what is happening internally in these institutions. What is happening inside? How are they protecting their customers? How are they accounting for their staff that are handling people's money and have authority to move people's money around? And that is where I think the major problem is, because it's not Jamaica centric, it's worldwide. Most of the frauds that we have investigated, or I have investigated, is internal people. People, even junior staff, who sees that a system is lax, the control environment is lax, or there's an environment of trust. Yeah man, it's my brethren. Yeah man, him can put it through. But that person is committing fraud because there's that element of trust. Think of some of the cases that you've heard out here where the frauds have been, people have been working there 30 years and suddenly they discover 130 million that the person has taken fraudulently. What I don't understand about those cases is that we have a basic idea of what people earn. Jamaica is a small society. How is it we don't question a bank teller who's driving an X5? How is it we don't look at people's lifestyle and kind of wonder, how is this happening? Not that you're calling someone a thief, but it sends up a red flag for you as an employer to say, I only pay you X amount. How is it? You're not going to go and ask them these questions, but it raises a red flag, and then you look at the areas that this person is responsible for. Closer with a microscope, see what's happening, and then shift up your risk assessment, shift up your fraud risk assessment within the institution. If you look at the statistics for fraud, they said in the Certified Fraud Examining Association, they do a report of nations every year, and that report of nations says that 5% of gross profit goes out to fraud.
5%?
5%
of gross profit?
Yeah.
Across the board?
Across the world goes to fraud. And that's an estimate. They call that a tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
Right? So think about little companies in Jamaica where 5% of their gross profit disappears. It's a big hit. And not only that, even if they don't consider it a big hit, think about it. That money could go towards paying people better.
Yes.
And paying people better mean we have a better social environment.
Since this is kind of well known, you know, and it's an estimate, 5%. You think that persons have reached a stage, or companies have reached a stage where they literally budget for that 5%?
It is possible that they do that, even though I would argue that they have their heads in the sand, and that until it happens to them, they don't take stock and they don't notice. So in our field, a lot of what we see is reaction instead of being proactive. And this is where I'm saying to people, spend that money, be proactive, and you will prevent all of this happening. Keep revising it. You cannot just say, but I did a fraud risk review last year. Fraud changes. The fraudster is studying everything you're doing. Every time you discover something he's done, he comes back. I shouldn't be saying he, they come back and they do whatever it is to get up to speed. But another thing with Jamaica, though, from my experience in Jamaica, is the cultural nuance, the informer for dead. No, even if people know somebody in the workplace that's committing fraud, a lot of time they won't tell, because informer for dead, or I'm a brethren, or I'm a brethren, I just one little thing him did I do.
Or maybe there's a personal benefit.
Or maybe there's, it's called collusion. Because I was going to get to that as well, because a lot of workplaces believe that they have segregation of duty. When you talk to people, they go, oh yeah man, them can't thief, because you check off and him add up and him write down. So 3 different people. It's 3 different people may be colluding. How have you taken into consideration when you're doing your controls how collusion may help? How have you taken into consideration if management can override systems? Because another statistic is that most of the crime, the frauds that are discovered, are supervisor level and up. It's not the small guy. The small guy may thief little petty cash, but the large scale frauds, and you can, well, you're a gleaner, so you see the stories, it's always managers and people who are there for very long because they know how to manipulate the system. Another thing is that our respect for authority. So we are a junior staff, we know something is going on with our manager, but we're afraid to talk because of this not wanting to lose your job and this hierarchical thing where you're a junior, you're not to say anything. And this is why you need to empower your staff to do something called professional skepticism. You get information, you look into the information and think about it skeptically. Don't just accept it as it is. think about what else could there be that's underlying this information, and that will tell you a lot. So one of the things that auditors are supposed to do is to exhibit professional skepticism. Right now in the UK, there's a big shift in audit because people go in and say they've audited and the books show a true and fair view, but a lot of stealing going on because auditors were not equipped or were not expected to detect fraud. They still are not, but they are able to, they are supposed to know within their responsibilities, determine whether there is a, I can't remember the term now, but whether there is a chance that the books and records are showing fraud. So one of the jobs that I'm doing at the present is that we go in and we teach the statutory auditors how to look for fraud.
So auditors can go into an institution, organization, audit the books, fraud is going on, and they miss it?
They miss it. It's not because they do what we call sampling. So say for example, random sampling. They may sample something that doesn't have fraud. But
it doesn't mean that fraud isn't going on elsewhere.
It doesn't mean fraud is not going on elsewhere. And that's why the UK has kind of cracked down on it's called ISA 240, International Standards of Auditing. And it's about the auditors' fraud-related responsibilities. And it lists out like a whole checklist of stuff that auditors should do to ensure that their accounts do not show material misstatement due to fraud. Also, in the past, they would show that the accounts are showing a true and fair view. They also now have to sign to say true and fair view, and we have done everything possible to detect whether there's material fraud. So that's where the world is moving, and I'm assuming Jamaica is going to move in that direction as well. And if Jamaica is moving in that direction, then fraud risk assessment and fraud risk management will be key. But what I am skeptical of, and it's not just a Jamaica thing, is that it becomes a tick box exercise. I go and I interview John Brown. Is there fraud in your organization? No, man, everything Chris, tick the box. But then professional skepticism says to me, fraud happens wherever humans are. So therefore, if a manager tells me no, there's no fraud, it tells me that either they're doing fraud themselves, or they don't understand what fraud is, or they don't have the necessary tools in place to detect that there's fraud taking place. And another rule of thumb that we go by is that if you find a small fraud, it's a smoking gun. Something else is going on underneath.
You think the thrust that we are making into a digitized society, you think that going in this way, the way that the world is going, but with archaic laws, you think that we are going to become even more exposed to fraud, number one, and we'll find it even more difficult to get justice because the laws and the thrust are parallel lines?
Yeah, you don't have to think far. Think of the scammers. Is anything happening to the scammers in Jamaica until the US steps in to get them extradited? No. If we go digital, what does that mean? There's hardly any footprints as such, or it's complicated to trace it. By the time you trace it, that person is in Timbuktu. We're making ourselves more vulnerable. We're not prepared, and it's going to implode. Because yes, we need to follow what's happening in the world, but at the same time, we need to have world-class standard of fraud detection and deterrence.
We don't have it in Jamaica.
We don't have it. The bubble is going to burst because we're inviting the professional fraudsters who are offering. Do you know that there are fraudsters that offer courses on the dark web where you can go to learn and graduate to become a fraudster, to become a hacker? Now, because Jamaica didn't have things like digital currency, etc., a lot of our frauds, we consider them old-fashioned fraud. You work in the bank, you skim the money, you thief this, you transfer. But we are opening the floodgates with digital currency. This whole crypto thing, everybody wants to go into crypto. All our YouTubers who are, is YouTube them call them? Social media people there.
Social media influencers.
We're opening the floodgates for fraudsters to come in.
How do we help ourselves? Or are we just galloping into the edge of a precipice? Yes, you said that the bubble is going to burst. How do we help ourselves?
How do we help ourselves? Education. People need to be aware of the dangers of doing things. Going back to the Bernard Lodge situation. I know desperate times call for desperate measures, but if those persons had asked the right questions, I couldn't see them being parted with their money. But we're not being educated. We're being educated. All right, you look on the billboard on the highway, speed kills. Why not educate people in a similar fashion? Why is fraud at bottom of the barrel? Is it because everybody does it? Is it because it's going to expose too many people? Is it because we think it's so intertwined in our culture that we don't want to rid it? But we're going to be in serious trouble if international organized financial crime fraudsters step into this country.
Or what's gonna stop them?
Laws. I see videos going around on WhatsApp where a kid says they want to be a scammer and everybody laughs. It's not funny. It's absolutely not funny. And these kids, guess what? They think it's a genuine career because they don't know any difference. So instead of us, and I'm going to talk about something controversial now, instead of us talking about the length of people's skirts, teach them how to fend off these men, to understand that it's not your skirt, it's not the way you dress, it's the man or the whoever is attacking you. In a similar way with fraud, we sit and we gripe about the bank and we gripe about this, and these poor old people, somebody call them and them sign. Stop and think. Public education. It needs, I'm telling you, because poor people, more and more it's becoming a cashless society. And literally going to be cashless, because you put your cash in the bank, you go there, you don't have no cash, or your cash is less because they're stealing your money. But things like access to the internet, for example, I check my bank account every chance I get. So if penny moves
and
from
you're
my
not
bank,
paranoid,
and I'm not paranoid,
okay,
but every day, because it's a cashless society and you can use your phone to purchase, but every time I go out, like on a weekend and you spend a bit more because you're shopping, I come back and I check everything. Recently, just the other day, went to a restaurant in Jamaica. People don't check their bills, and I saw things on the bills that didn't belong, and the person apologized. So I'm like, but didn't you see that we got none of these things? The person was, oh, we're so sorry. So the next time we're going, they're here, Karen, check the bill, make sure. Those are the little things that people like that do, and then they take your money.
So they can charge you for something, you pay for it, and then they take the cash.
Yeah, because they can ring up a refund and re-enter the bill properly.
So every receipt. So we can start by having ourselves every receipt. And insist upon a receipt.
Insist upon a receipt. If it's cash,
Yeah.
of course, we tend not to let go of our cash until we're sure, say we get the 10 guinea, the 5, so a sap, whatever. But in a supermarket, make sure you get the money. Another thing that they used to do in Jamaica, I don't know if it's the same, where you go to the teller and they're counting the money and they're dropping some in their lap.
Yes.
And you think you're not getting, so be diligent. Check every single thing.
Yes.
That is how you lose money, because you think, but me come out of the bank, then pick my pocket. No, you never left the bank with the money.
Yes.
So it's
You left the bank with less money than you thought.
yeah, and this sound quite rudimentary. It sound very basic, but the little man on the street need to know that.
Yes.
The little girls and the little boys in high school need to understand. that scamming is not a career. Scamming destroys lives. Scamming has a lot to do with murders. People losing people, children losing parents, and it makes our society become chaotic.
One of the things that has irked me all the time is like when I have to call just anything about my account. They ask me some questions.
Good.
Within the last year, I mean, for however number of times I call, they ask me the same questions. So I know the answers. It's my account. So I start to give them. I said, my name is so and so, my mother's maiden name is that, and I was born so and so. They ask you, okay, thank you for that. But then I realized that it's not the bank people who are talking to me. These are third-party agents because they are outsourced. Does this make every single person with a bank account now put them in danger?
I've had this argument maybe 4 weeks ago with a certain bank. So I called the bank and they asked for 7 different pieces of identification. My name, maiden name, middle name, mother's maiden name, date of birth, where I work, which number to call me back. Now this 7 piece of information, they know me 100%. They can go and open an account with all the information I've given them. And I said to the person, why is it that you need all of this information from me? And then listen to this joke. After I said that, they go, oh, we have to call the particular branch because I cannot see certain information. Because all I wanted to know was the expiry date of something, of a fixed deposit.
Okay, so now you know for sure that you were not dealing with a bank employee.
Yes.
And you don't know who you were
And
dealing
I
with.
don't know who I was dealing with. They just give you a name, which you don't know.
Right.
And I turned to the person and said, you're going to ask me this 7 piece of information and then say to me you can't help me. What are you doing with my information? Are you selling my information?
Yeah.
They paused, nothing. And I said, it may not be you, but it may be your colleague. There is no way you need to know so much information. And I said, you must, and I wasn't even thinking it was outsourced. I even said to them, these are the things you are to raise at your management staff meeting to say, customers are complaining that they are giving out too much information and therefore they're not trusting us. And in a similar way, when you call the UK, well, not in a similar, in a dissimilar way, you call, you give your name or you give your 4 digits. They'll ask for your password. They don't ask for the entire password. They say, give me letter 2, give me letter 6. So whoever is putting it in doesn't even know what your password is. But in this country, so it will flash up on the screen, letter 6, and you say B.
Yes.
And you say letter 7.
Oh.
It's now Z, and it says correct.
Oh, so they have no
They
clue
no clue what your
password
password is. So they need to have a system. There's no way somebody should have those 7 pieces of information on me.
Yes.
You know where I live. You have my address. Because I think they had asked for my address as well, my phone number, where I work, date of birth, mother's maiden name. These are information that you put in when you're doing a mortgage.
Yes.
You're applying for your NHD.
Yes.
You're applying for a loan.
Yes. Yes. This kind of you talk about how scamming, for example, it destroys families and the things we ought to be teaching our children in school. Are you suggesting, or do you think that we should be simplifying this from the primary school level? Should this now become a part of civics?
Civics. I was
primary
about
school?
to say that civics. Just like how in civics they teach you other little, I don't know if them call it homework again, little things,
Yeah.
and how you do your little budget and stuff.
Yes.
Tell them how to recognize fraud when they see it. Because one, they need to understand that you'll go to jail. if eventually the law is changed. They need to understand how they protect themselves, them granny, them mother, and everybody. Because even children are being targeted to access their parents' stuff. They go and they buy games, and it's a fraudster that's doing the games, and then put their mother bank account in there. So these are all, so you could do parental control till the cows come home. That child see your mobile phone put down and them take it up. It's children, they're mischievous. But if they understand how to identify it, they'll protect you, the parent.
And one way for them to be able to identify it is to be taught
in schools.
Yeah. You know, for a long time we've been talking about reintroducing civics to school. I'm not even sure if that where that is now, but it is where I learned so many things about society, yes, and people, people in Jamaica, people elsewhere, just things that you ought to know, and especially then so much about the Commonwealth, civics for young Jamaicans. I'll never forget that little red cover book. I don't even know where that is, and I think everybody has been talking, and I don't know.
I think that's where the emphasis should be, because what I've realized as well, I'm talking to, because I mentor younger people, and I tend to talk to them about this thing. It's not all about getting 14 sexes, and 13 sexes and 11 sexes. Way better than in our days when we get 6 and 7.
Oh yes.
And we still make it in life.
Yes.
And it's more about how you operate in civil society, how you operate when you leave Jamaica, how you operate in your community, how we become a village again. And to become a village again, we cannot inculcate a culture where we just overlook fraud. Yeah, naira bar, but not true, she fool. It's not because you're fool, it's just being unaware. Because big CEOs, just to put it in perspective, have the same approach. Big partners in law firms have the same approach. Big audit partners have the same law approach. I remember speaking to one, and I was like, have you asked certain questions about this entity? Oh, I know them. They'll never do this. And by the following year, there was a fraud. And it was the person that they knew.
Okay.
And it's so family, you know that saying, familiarity breeds contempt. It is not just a saying. It does happen. And because we like to say we operate from a place of trust,
yes,
but you need to trust but verify.